Have you ever wondered what the Israel-Palestine conflict is about? Well, you're not alone. This conflict, deeply rooted in a colonial act over a century ago, has shaped the course of history in the Middle East. It's a clash that has resulted in the deaths of tens of thousands of people and the displacement of millions. This conflict isn't something that can be understood by looking at a single event or issue. It's a complex web of historical, political, and social factors that have intertwined over the years, creating a situation that seems almost intractable. Just recently, tensions escalated when Israel declared war on the Gaza Strip following an attack by Hamas. This resulted in a bombing campaign and a blockade of essential supplies, further deepening the rift between the two sides. Understanding this conflict is more than just about knowing the headlines. It's about grasping the human cost, the loss, and the struggle. It's about empathizing with the people who live this conflict every day. So let's peel back the layers of history, politics, and culture that have shaped this conflict. Let's dig in deeper to understand the roots of this conflict. To truly understand the conflict, we must journey back to over a century ago. Our story begins during the twilight years of the Ottoman Empire, an era when colonial powers were carving up the Middle East. In the midst of this, the land known today as Israel and Palestine became a focal point of contention. This land, a cradle of civilization, has always held immense significance due to its unique geography. Nestled at the crossroads of Africa, Asia, and Europe, it has been the stage for cultural, political, and religious exchanges for millennia. For Jews, it is their ancestral homeland, the place of their biblical origins. For Muslims, it houses the Al-Aqsa Mosque, the third holiest site in Islam. And for Christians, it is where Jesus Christ was born and crucified. The late 19th and early 20th centuries saw a surge of Zionism, a nationalist movement advocating for the return of Jews to this ancestral land. This was in reaction to centuries of persecution in Europe, culminating in the horrors of the Holocaust. The Zionist movement gained momentum and support, particularly from the British, who issued the Balfour Declaration in 1917, promising a national home for the Jewish people in Palestine. However, this promise overlooked the fact that the land was already home to a predominantly Arab population who had their own national aspirations. The Arab inhabitants, understandably, did not welcome the influx of Jewish immigrants. This laid the groundwork for a bitter conflict, a struggle over the same piece of land by two peoples who both saw it as rightfully theirs. In the late 40s, the United Nations proposed a partition plan, dividing the land into separate Jewish and Arab states. The Jewish leaders accepted the plan, but the Arab leaders did not. The result was a war in 1948, known as the War of Independence to Israelis and the Nakba, or catastrophe, to Palestinians. These historical roots sowed the seeds for a conflict that would span decades. As the 20th century rolled in, so did nationalism and the desire for a homeland. With the dawn of the 20th century, the world witnessed a surge in nationalism. No place was this more evident than in the land of Palestine. Both Palestinian Arabs and Jewish immigrants were filled with a profound sense of nationalistic fervor, each group yearning for recognition and autonomy. For Palestinians, the land they called home for centuries was under threat. They saw the influx of Jewish immigrants as an encroachment on their homeland, an intrusion into their way of life. Their nationalistic aspirations were rooted in their history, their connection to the land, and their distinct culture and identity. In contrast, Jews from Europe and beyond, escaping persecution and seeking a sanctuary, found hope in the idea of a Jewish homeland. They were driven by the Zionist movement, a form of Jewish nationalism that emerged in the late 19th century. The Zionists saw Palestine as their ancestral homeland, a place where they could establish a nation-state for Jews worldwide. However, the nationalistic aspirations of both groups were on a collision course. The land that both Palestinians and Jews claimed as their homeland was the same: Palestine. This overlapping claim to the same piece of earth led to tensions that eventually boiled over into violence and hostility. Clashes became frequent as both groups asserted their claim to the land. The British, who held the mandate for Palestine, found themselves in the middle of a growing conflict they could not control. They were dealing with two nationalistic movements that were diametrically opposed to each other, each determined to establish their homeland in Palestine. This set the stage for a conflict that would intensify in the years to come. Fast forward to the 21st century, the conflict has evolved, but the tension remains. In recent years, the Israel-Palestine conflict has seen a new wave of violence and unrest. Just the other day, Israel declared war on the Gaza Strip following an attack by Hamas. This declaration of war was not just a mere statement, it was a call to arms that led to an aggressive bombing campaign. Imagine this. It's a sunny day. Suddenly the sky darkens, not with clouds but with smoke and debris. The sound of explosions fill the air. Streets once bustling with life are now deserted, filled with rubble and the echoes of conflict. This is the harsh reality for the people living in the Gaza Strip. But the conflict doesn't just end with the sound of the last explosion, it continues in a different way, through a blockade. Essential supplies, things we take for granted like food, water, medicine, these are cut off, leaving millions of people in a state of uncertainty and desperation. Picture this. You're thirsty, but there's no water. You're sick, but there's no medicine. It's a struggle for survival every single day. This blockade isn't just a physical barrier, it's a psychological one too. It's a constant reminder of the conflict, a symbol of the control one group has over another. It's a tool of oppression, used to exert power and instill fear. The Israel-Palestine conflict isn't just about land anymore, it's about power, control, and survival. It's about a people's struggle for self-determination and their fight against oppression. It's a complex web of historical grievances, political ideologies, and religious beliefs. And as we sit comfortably in our homes thousands of miles away from the conflict, it's easy to forget about it, to turn a blind eye. But for the people living it, it's their everyday reality. They wake up to it. They go to sleep with it. It's a constant looming presence. It's a grim picture, but it's the reality of the Israel-Palestine conflict. You might be wondering, why is this conflict so complicated? Well, it's like a tightly knotted ball of string. The more you try to untangle it, the more it seems to tighten. The Israel-Palestine conflict is not a standalone situation, but rather a complex web of interrelated factors that have been built up over decades, even centuries. Let's start with the involvement of other nations. The Middle East is a strategic hotspot, a crossroad of continents, if you will. This makes it a prime target for foreign intervention. Countries worldwide have vested interests in the region, whether it's for political alliances, economic benefits, or religious affiliations. These external influences often add fuel to the fire, escalating tensions and complicating efforts towards peace. Then there's the religious significance of the land. Both Israelis and Palestinians view the area as their spiritual home. For Jews, it's the land of their ancestors, the Promised Land. For Palestinians, particularly Muslims, it's home to the Al-Aqsa Mosque, the third holiest site in Islam. This deep-rooted religious attachment adds an emotional dimension to the conflict that's not easy to navigate. Lastly, there's the political instability in the region. Over the years, leadership changes, shifting alliances, and varying degrees of commitment to peace have created a volatile political landscape. This uncertainty makes it challenging to maintain consistent dialogue and negotiation, let alone reach a lasting resolution. So, you see, it's not just about two groups fighting over a piece of land, it's about history, religion, politics, and international relations, all tangled up in a complex dance. And each time one of these elements shifts, it pulls on the strings of the others, creating a ripple effect that further complicates the situation. The complexity of the conflict makes it difficult to find a simple solution. Yet understanding these complexities is the first step towards untangling this knotted conflict and maybe someday finding a path to peace. So, what have we learned about the Israel-Palestine conflict? We've journeyed through the intricate timeline of a conflict that's more than a century old. We've seen its roots in colonial acts, where the land was promised to two peoples. We've witnessed the rise of nationalism, fueled by historical grievances, and the emergence of distinct national identities, Israeli and Palestinian. We've delved into the modern-day conflict marked by a series of wars, intifadas, and peace processes. We've seen the immense human cost, tens of thousands of lives lost and millions displaced. The recent events where Israel declared war on Gaza following a Hamas attack have only added another layer of complexity to this tumultuous situation. Yet, we've also acknowledged that the Israel-Palestine conflict is not just about land or religion. It's a deeply rooted, multifaceted issue involving politics, identity, and human rights. It's a conflict marked by intractability and complexity, where simple solutions are elusive. Understanding the conflict is the first step towards advocating for peace and justice in the region.